The writing is the thing that has saved me. And it's cheap. You know, you don't need to get paint. You don't have to get funding for film. Very inexpensive hobby. But keep your day job.
Hello, and thanks for joining us back at Chicago Humanities Tapes. We are the audio arm of the live Chicago Humanities Spring and Fall Festivals. I'm Alisa Rosenthal, and I'm here to bring you the best bits of the best chats from our oeuvre. We've got some very cool live events coming up, including ABC News chief anchor George Stephanopoulos. He'll join us at IIT on May 18th with David Axelrod. Head to chicagohumanities.org to learn more, snag tickets. Let's get into it. As you could tell from the cold open, this program is such a gem. Poet, author, and Chicago native Sandra Cisneros penned the best-selling novel The House on Mango Street, which won the American Book Award and which I read and loved in high school. Shout out to Evanston Township High School for that reading. Her other honors include fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and the MacArthur Foundation. And in 2016, she received the National Medal of Arts awarded by President Obama. Her most recent book of poetry, Woman Without Shame, celebrates and explores her experiences of being Mexican, being a woman, and a poem called My Mother and Sex. It's great. She chats with Professor Daisy Hernández, an essayist, journalist, and an associate professor in the English department at Northwestern University, where this conversation also took place. She's an award-winning author and reporter for The New York Times, The National Geographic, The Atlantic, and Slate. Check the show notes after you finish listening to the program for links to all the works they mention in their chat. You won't be disappointed. This is Sandra Cisneros with Daisy Hernández, live at Northwestern University's Pick Staker Concert Hall in fall 2023.
Thank you for coming out in the rain and wind. These are diehard fans.
Muchas gracias. Yes. Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you. And Sandra, bienvenida a Northwestern.
That's the first time I've ever been here, I think. No, that's not true. I came to hear a concert by Leo Brauer, the Cuban composer, when I was very young. Yeah, because he asked me out afterwards. And I was
we might get to hear some secrets today.
I was so shocked. And if I didn't have my brother Carlos with me, I would have gone.
Los hermanos, they often get in the way of the fun stuff happening in our lives. You know, I want to start by actually thanking you, Sandra. I was reading Sandra's books when I was a teenager on a public bus in New Jersey many, many years ago, and it was the first time that I saw myself and my family in a book. And I haven't had a chance to publicly say this before. So thank you, because it made me a writer, and I would not be here today as a writer and at Northwestern if it had not been for you and your books. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Wow.
I really appreciate it. Yeah. Let's start by talking about poetry. So I was thinking about who I was when I was 18 and that age, and I remember that the question that I had back then is a question that I often get when I teach Introduction to Creative Writing, which is, what is a poem? What makes a text a poem? And has that definition changed for you over time?
Okay, before I answer that, I need to ask, how many people here are teachers? Ooh, woohoo, woohoo. All right, wonderful. Bravo. You are courageous and you are my heroes. And how many people here are librarians? Woohoo, woohoo, woohoo. You know, the teachers and the librarians are doing the bravest work I know in these times. So I applaud you for it. Thanks to the teachers and the librarians who made me a writer. I thank the Chicago Public Library, that my mom took us to the library. And, it was a teacher in the 6th grade that changed my life. I went from a school where there were very unhappy teachers there. And we moved to the north side, and I went to school at Sisters of Christian Charity, and there was a lay teacher in the 6th grade that changed my life. And she did something that I had never had done before, and that is she saw me with ojos de amor. She saw me with eyes of love, and she singled out something I could do that was positive instead of being singled out for negative. And she picked up a piece of artwork and put it up on the front of the room and said, "This is what our new student has done. Isn't this beautiful?" And at first, when she picked up my paper, my heart just leapt. I thought, what did I do wrong? That was the old school. And I was sure that she was confused and had mistaken me for someone intelligent, because I had just gotten some new little blue glasses with pointy from the Sears. I had just gotten them, and I thought, she thinks I'm smart. And I felt sorry for her. It was a grave mistake to think I was smart. I had C's and D's, and this is not a lie. You can look at my House of My Own, Stories from My Life essays. There's an essay called A Girl Called Dreamer, and my report card is there to prove to you I'm telling the truth. I had C's and D's, and this teacher saw me con ojos de amor and singled out what I could do. And because she had faith in me, I did something I'd never done at the other school. And she asked a question. I raised my hand. Even though I knew the answer in the other school, I didn't dare. But in this school, this teacher was the first one that had faith and showered me with love and attention. And I tried, and I moved up from C's and D's to B's and C's, and eventually when I graduated to A's and B's. So it makes all the difference. A teacher or an individual or a parent that gives you just puro amor y amor puro. And that's the secret, no? That's the secret.
Absolutely.
But I was getting a roundabout way to what is a poem, which many people ask, even in my own family. So I want to explain to all of you what is a poem. Every poet will have a different answer. But for me, it's very clear that a poem is music with words. And it's like jazz. You know how, if you're a drummer, you take sticks and you're always hitting them against metal, or you're hitting them against your cup or against the floor, or whatever you find to get a different sound. Well, you're doing that with words as a poet. You're moving them around and you're playing with them and you're finding delicious words. You're finding words in other languages and you're moving them around and you're just improving and you're making music with words. And that, to me, is one of the things that poetry is. And the other thing is poetry is an emotion that comes in your heart that doesn't have any words. You can't speak about what it is. It's just this blurry thing in your heart. And when people say, well, how are you? You usually tell them fine, but that's not true. If you spend some time by yourself quietly and you wrote down, well, I think and then just keep writing and writing, something would blossom out of that compost. First, you start with junk and you just say, I think I'm fine. Well, not exactly. And you keep following it and following it and following it till some little flower blooms from that compost. That's a poem. And you don't know what it is when you begin. If you know what it is, you should write an essay or a story. But a poem is something that's this emotion that is lodged in your heart. It's like finding a pebble in your shoe or a thorn in your thumb. And when you pull it out, you say, oh, that's what it is. So you have to stalk and follow a poem. And that means time. And sometimes it takes several hours or several months or several years before you can pluck that thorn from your heart and say, oh, this is what I was feeling and I didn't know it. And that's the beautiful thing about poetry, because it keeps us healthy so that we're not angry at other people. It keeps us healthy when we're sad and transforms our pain to light. It makes us better human beings to be around others. It celebrates joys. Whatever you're feeling, it's therapy for your heart. And who doesn't want that, right? It's like you're doing self-therapy, self-love, self-care. That's poetry.
Beautiful. Thank you. You're reminding me that there were so many times when I was reading this new book, Woman Without Shame, where I had those moments of like, no words, but just, I had like such an emotional and visceral response to a line that you had. So this is a book that celebrates being a woman, a mujer, a Latina. And you wrote early in the book, I was in training to be a woman without shame. And you pointed out that that's different from shameless. So sin vergüenza, not compared to sin vergüenza. So can you talk with us about what that difference is? That's so powerful. And maybe you'll read from that poem too?
I have to say that everything in my life, all the writing has started from a place of shame. I was ashamed of being not the smart one in the classroom, and I was ashamed of not having the right shoes and not being pretty and not feeling loved in public. I was loved at home, but like when I went out to the schools, I felt less than. So there was a lot of shame, and writing has helped me to survive that. And as soon as you conquer one shame, another shame pops up in your life. How do you like that? So now I'm 68 and I have different shame than I did when I was a child. But the writing is the thing that has saved me and transformed me, and it can transform you. And it's cheap. You don't need to get paint. You don't have to go to the paint store. You don't have to get funding for a film. You can use a pencil or any pen and a piece of paper. You don't have to have a laptop. It's very inexpensive hobby. But keep your day job. All right, this is an answer to the question, a woman without shame. And, a lot of times we have memories of things that have happened to us, and we don't know what they mean. So this poem came out very easily because I was thinking about a time in my life when I wanted to get over a shame of my body. And, so I'm just going to read the poem, and the poem explains it. Tea dance, Provincetown, 1982. At the boy bar, no one danced with me. I danced with everyone. The entire room, every song. That's what was so great about the boy bars then. The room vibrated, shook, convulsed in one collective zoological frenzy. Truthfully, I was the only woman there. Who cared? At the boat slip, I was welcomed. The girl bar down the street, dull as Brillo. But the tea dances shimmied, miraculous as mercury, acrid stink of sweat, chlorine tang of semen, slippery male energy, something akin to watching horses fighting, something exciting. My lover, the final summer he was by, introduced me to the teas, often hovered out of sight, distracted by poolside beauties, while I danced innocent, content with the room of men. He was a skittish kite, that one. Kites swerve and swoop and whoop. Only a matter of time, I knew. Apropos, I called him my little piece of string. And that's what kites leave you with in the end. There was an expiration date to summer. Understood. That season, I was experimenting to be the woman I wanted to be. Taught myself to sun topless at the gay beach where sunbathers shouted, "Ranger," a relayed warning announcing authority en route on horseback, coming to inspect if we were clothed. Else fined $50 sans bottom, 100 topless, 50 a tit, I joked. It was easy to be half naked at a gay beach. Men didn't bother to look. I was in training to be a woman without shame, Not a shameless woman, una sin vergüenza, but una sin vergüenza. Glorious in her skin, flesh akin to pride. I shed that summer not only bikini top, but guilt-driven Eve and self-immolating Fatima. Was practicing for my Minoan days ahead. Medusa hair and breasts spectacular as Nike of Samothrace welcoming the salty wind. Yes, I was a lovely thing then. I can say this with impunity. At 28, she was a woman unrelated to me. I could tell stories. I have so many to tell, and none to tell them to, except the page, my faithful confessor. Lover and I feuded one night when he wouldn't come home with me. His secret? Herpes. Laughable in retrospect, considering the plague was already decimating dances across the globe. But that was before we knew it as the plague. We were all on the run in '82, jumping to Laura Branigan's Gloria, the summer's theme song, beat thumping in our blood, drinks sweeter than bodies convulsing on the floor. Okay. So when you begin a poem, you don't know where it's going. If you, like I said, if you know where it's going, then you shouldn't write a poem. Write an essay or story. So I had no idea where that was going. It just was a memory, and it took me to places I didn't expect. And if you're ashamed of where it's taking you, you're on the right track. So you should always make a list of the things you wish you could forget or the things you're ashamed of and write about that. And then, guess what? You're not ashamed anymore. That's the wonderful thing. Or if you're still ashamed, you learn how to live with it. And so a lot of poetry that we write, we don't write it to hold it up or publish it. The real reason we need art is to make peace with ourselves, to feel better, to go on with life, to celebrate our day, to forgive ourselves, maybe forgive others. It's very therapeutic, and that's the real reason. The best writing you'll do will be the one you can't show anyone. If you feel like, oh no, I can't show this to anyone, you're on the right track. That's why it took 28 years, because many of these, I write them, and like Emily Dickinson, I throw them under the bed, and then it takes several years before I take them out again and say, I think this might help somebody, and I'm not ashamed anymore, and I send it out like that.
Beautiful. You're reminding me that many years ago you gave me a wonderful writing exercise. I asked you, this was at a National Women's Studies Conference a long time ago, maybe 2007, and I went up to the microphone. I was so nervous. There were like, 500 people in the audience, and I was like, so I'm having writer's block? And what's your advice? And you're like, there is no such thing as writer's block. I was like, are you sure? Because I'm having it right now. And you said, you're just afraid. You're afraid. So what you do is you go home and you write, this is what I am afraid to say. I am afraid to say that. And oh my goodness, I actually went back to my room that night and I started writing, and it completely freed me up with the piece that I was working on.
Because a lot of times when you have writer's block, it's because you're thinking about the reader or the listener. It's the same thing like when you speak and you stammer. You stammer because you're concerned about the listener who's listening to you. The same thing with when you write. You can't think about the reader, otherwise you can't write anything good. You have to imagine that what you have to say is too dangerous to get published in your lifetime. And sometimes it is, and sometimes you have no privacy. If you grew up like me in a house with no doors, there's no privacy. I tell young people, make sure you have privacy, and if you don't, you can write it, and then you can eat it. You can tear it up and throw it in Lake Michigan. You can burn it in an ashtray, whatever you have to do, but you have to be able to express these emotions. We can't hold all the emotions that we feel. Every day, so many things happen to us, and some are painful. For me, the stories I write about that are my hits are things that I held for years. My story 11 is something that happened to me at 9 that I held on and couldn't speak about till I was 30. And imagine, holding the things we've seen or heard or things people said to us. It's very painful. We have to let them go. And even if you don't publish them, put them on the page. You can make a ritual, and you don't have to keep it. You don't have to show it to anyone, but you do have to process. It's a composting. No?
Beautiful, yes. So I'm going to confess that when I opened up the book, I always like to look at the table of contents to see how the poet organized the poems, and I like to see the titles. And there was one titled My Mother and Sex. And so I immediately went to that poem. I skipped ahead.
All right, do not worry. This is the G rating reading, okay? If you want the adult reading, you can go to the last section, Cisneros sin censura, and you young people, do not read this book. Do not.
So I'm hoping you will read that poem.
This is a G rating poem, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful poem. And what I wanted to ask was that, and I don't know if that reaction of mine was like being Latina, being a woman, just that it's still so taboo to talk about this subject and our mothers. But also this book is so much about pleasure in all its ways, and so much also about aging as well as a woman. And I feel like you are trailblazing yet again, because I realize I don't feel like I have a blueprint necessarily.
Well, when I started getting older, I knew that I was didn't think like others. When you go to the lingerie department, and things that are size large or extra large or XXL all come in beige, white, and black. Very boring. And I said, what's the matter with our society, right? So I wrote a poem about that, but I'm not going to read that. I'll read the one, My Mother and Sex. My mother was incredible person and very self-educated. She had incredible people and took us to the library, but she could talk about politics, anything that's going on in the world, but she could not talk about her private life. So this is a poem about that. My Mother and Sex. 8 live births. How many dead? Who knew? Not us. Her 7 survivors. When a bedroom scene flashed on TV, she'd shriek and scamper to her room as if she'd seen a rat. It made us laugh. What were we? Immaculate conceptions? Could be. Sex for her was dead. A duty dreadful as cooking for her famished army. Sad to think this, pure postulation from lack of conclusive conversation. She never talked of sex, especially not with me. She said, I put everything in a book. Agreed, but what was worse, the truth or my imagination? What I know for sure, rapture for her, a library record symphony, ecstasy, opera in the park, intimate pleasure, books, Friday, Turkle, Chomsky, Herculean, brilliant. Men, unlike the man who shared her bed, who favored Sábado Gigante to Sebastião Salgado. And yet, father spoiled her. His Mexican empress, Paricutin tempestuous, clueless to what she craved. Her red flare sent up weekends. Help! There's no intelligent life around here. Evenings in the blue moonbeam of TV. Father mesmerized by Mexican thick-thighed floozies mother's word, not mine, shaking their hoochie coochies. Father never drank, ran off, split flesh, brought home each faithful Friday a paycheck. Why would she complain? She lived alone in a house full of lives by the time I knew her. Snake bitter, mingy, dead before being born. A woman in formaldehyde.
That was another poem where I found myself just catching my breath, especially as you turned it to like what her pleasures were, books and opera and the arts, because your sense of pleasure through this book also comes back to books and to the arts.
Thanks to my mom that all of her children love the museums, and we have library cards, and I had a library card before I could hold a pencil, so it was a change. My mom, we grew up in the poorest neighborhoods, but my mom enriched our lives with her love and yearning to be an artist. She wanted to be the artist, and she opened the path and was very bitter at the end of her life that she didn't reach her dreams, but she didn't see what she did. She only saw what she didn't do. And I'm so grateful to my mom for allowing me to grow up. And I don't know how to do the things that my neighbors knew how to do. I don't know how to make tortillas. I don't know what it is to put diapers on my little brothers. My mother always allowed me the privilege to stay in my room if I had a book in my hand, even when she needed me. Later on, after cooking, I would do the cleanup, but she respected that time, and that's very rare for mothers in the barrio to do that.
I had the same experience, and
You did?
yes, I did. So I don't know how to cook. I don't do any of that, but I can write a book. Yeah, I had this same experience. A very, I think we come to even at that age, I knew that sacrifices were being made so that I could have a very different life in certain ways.
Yeah.
There's so much sexy in this book, but there's also a lot of spirituality. There's so much spirituality through this poem and through this poetry book, and several of the poems are in the shape of what I would say prayers. And the last time we spoke was for the Buddhist magazine Tricycle.
Yes.
And when I was reading the book again, I was so enamored by these moments with the natural world. And it really, you talk about the little ants who teach you the lessons in nonviolent persuasion by moving you out of the bathroom.
They every winter they move into my shower, and I don't want to kill them, so I have to take a bath, And they do this with, non-violently. I'm so impressed. So they're all over my house, in my kitchen. We have a law, you can't kill the insects. If there's a cockroach, I take it in a Kleenex and I parachute it outside. Nothing gets killed. We're Buddhists. We're both Buddhists. And I think the great book that changed me was Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh, which really revolutionized, Buddhism, but it revolutionized me in my way of dealing with the world and dealing with my activism and dealing with my brothers and my mother and, the gurus of your life that make life a little strenuous, But I learned a lot, and I was so grateful because I always wanted to be in those magazines that you see at Whole Foods by the register. I always wanted to be in one of those.
And she is.
So thank you so much for doing that work of interviewing me.
Can you talk to us about some of these poems? I'm thinking about the poem El Hombre, which is very, very intense. I don't know that you necessarily, I don't know if you want to read it, but maybe it's that poem.
I can read it, but you have to help me. Can you help me? Okay, I'm going to do it.
This is a real treat.
And it's a poem where it has a stanza that you, the audience, have to help me with.
Audience participation. I love it. Thank you.
I wrote this poem as a commission, and if you've ever been commissioned to write anything, it's hard, but make it 20 times harder if it's a poem, because you don't know if a poem's going to turn out. You don't know what a poem's going to be about. It's like being a magician and people are saying, pull a rabbit out of the hat, and you dig in there and you bring out an iguana. No, you don't know what you're going to get when you write poetry. As I said, if you know what you're going to pull out of the hat, then write an essay or a story. So I was commissioned, and I remember saying, uh-oh, all right. So it took me a while. And this is the painting that they commissioned, is a Rufino Tamayo painting, and it's called El Hombre. So I live in Mexico now. I live in San Miguel de Allende, and I witness a lot of things. Just like you in Chicago are witnessing incredible homelessness and the refugee situation at the police stations. We are bearing witness. And what do you do with that? You have to, you can weep, or you can go to sleep and forget about it, or you can write a poem. El Hombre. And what I'm going to do is read the chorus, and it's like this. Mándanos luz, and you're going to say, the translation, send us all light, so we can practice. Mándanos luz, send us all light. Thank you. El Hombre after Tamayo. On the eve of International Women's Day, in a field on the road to Celaya, they find her body, the deaf-mute girl who walked her dog in Parque Juarez. No one tried, blamed, named. The town knows. It's her father's debts. This is how they pay un hombre who can't pay. Mándanos luz, send us all light. In small print in the back pages of today's paper, I read this small news. Un hombre purépecha lifted from his purépecha village. Daily the purépechas demand his return. Daily el hombre does not return. He is only one of many lifted. When you are a native in your native land, to whom do you demand? Who listens? Mándanos luz, send us all light. The bird merchant at the Tuesday Mercado, 6 pages of sensontle strapped on his back, shoves a mesh shopping bag so close to my face, I have to step back to see a flutter of frightened canaries. In the eyes of El Hombre, the same urgency, the same fear. Mándanos luz, send us all light. The gringo Alan tells me the story of the pig who thought he was a dog. Solo vino, he was called, because he came alone. How each day Alan drove along the road to Dolores, the dogs would run from the squatter's shack and give chase. The pig who thought he was a dog trotting behind them. Until one day, the pig isn't there. The dogs disappear too, one by one by one. Alan shrugs. When un hombre is hungry, there is no one to blame. Mándanos luz, send us all light. The religion section of our Guanajuato newspaper features an article on St. Francis, un hombre of austerity, as a model for all to live in poverty. This in a country where almost every hombre, mujer, y niño is already on the path to sainthood. Mándanos luz. How it happened was like this. One night, Rosana catches un hombre breaking into her grocery store, the son of a neighbor. Her shouts wake the barrio. They're able to hold the thief until the police arrive. Rosana is there to bear witness at the court proceedings and to witness the court set him free. She gathers her pain in a handkerchief, goes home, and calls the boy's mother, Rosanna, and the mother of the thief. Each woman lets loose a sea of grief. When she tells me this story, the sea is still there in Rosanna's eyes. Mándanos luz, send us all light. Carlos and Raul, the silver-tongued poets of Chicano, Illinois, have never been to the country of their ancestry, though they're silver-haired hombres. When I invite them south, they refuse. They're afraid of bad hombres. No one has told them the ones who buy drugs and sell arms to los bad hombres are U.S. citizens. Mándanos luz, send us all light. The blind harmonica player, un hombre who plays Camino de Guanajuato in front of Banco Santander, clutches his baseball cap of small coins whenever he hears someone running too close. No vale nada la vida. La vida no vale nada. Life's worth nothing. Nothing is what life's worth. Mándanos luz. Send us all light. Un hombre tells me, you don't even have to learn Spanish to live here. Amado, the San Miguel realtor. You can train your staff to do what you need, and you don't have to pay them much either. Mándanos luz. Send us all light. Dallas, 1953, a seer named Stanley Marcus purchases a mural by Rufino Tamayo to reinforce friendship between Texas and Mexico. This in a time in history when Texas still posts signs on restaurant, no dogs or Mexicans. The painting is of un hombre anchored to the earth, reaching for the heavens, a balance of earth and sky, north and south, yours and mine, because the universe is about interconnection. Tamayo calls this painting man excelling himself. Mándanos luz, send us all light. Message from Mexico to the United States of America. When we are safe, you are safe. When you are safe, we are safe. Tell this to your politicians. Mándanos luz, send us all light. There's a Mexican saying, hablando se entiende la gente. Talking to one another, we understand one another. I would add, and listening, we understand even better. Mándanos luz, send us all light. Mándanos luz, mándanos luz.
Thank you. I think you felt the power of that, yes, throughout the book.
Can I read one poem for your tía?
Yes, please.
Señora, este se lo dedico a usted. En español, porque me salió en español. I wrote this poem and it came out in Spanish because now I live in a place where I hear Spanish y me salió porque vivo en San Miguel de Allende, ¿no? Es claro, es natural. Y lo escribí en español y lo traduje al inglés. I wrote it in Spanish and I translated it in English. So read the two next to each other, but first in Spanish. Quiero ser Maguey en mi próxima vida. Dar cara al sol todo el día. Reventar hijos al aire como una piñata. Ahorrar agua. Brotar una flor con fleco estirándose al cielo. Estirando al cielo. ¡Qué lujo! Quiero pertenecer a estas tierras que existían antes de que el mundo fuera redondo. Picar las nalgas de los que se acercan demasiado, regalar aguamiel al que se atreve a chupar mi jugo y morir de esta comunión, deshacerme como ceniza, volver a vivir en la tierra violenta, explotar de la huerta como paricutín, volver a renacer, morir para siempre ser. I want to be a Maguey in my next life. Face to the sun all day, burst offspring into the air like a piñata. Store water, bloom a tasseled flower, stretching itself to the sky, stretching to the sky. What luxury. I want to belong to these lands that existed before the world was round. Pinch the asses of those who come close to me. Give aguamiel to the one who dares suck my juice. And die from this communion, dissolve like ash, return to live on earth, violent, detonate from a field like paricutin, return to be reborn, die to eternally be. Okay. Gracias. I did a little switch on what I thought I was going to read because of our conversation, so thank you for helping me along. I was going to read the Hokey Pokey poem.
Maybe we can do it after Q&A.
First, I like the questions, so let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Leon Moreno, and I am an MFA creative writing student at Columbia College. I'm a career changer. And my question is, what keeps you motivated to keep writing? Because sometimes you know how it is, and we just need that push and motivation.
Okay, did everybody hear the question? What keeps you motivated? Because writing's hard. You have to do it by yourself, and then everyone who's near you says, come out of there. Why do you want to be by yourself, right? Nobody wants you to be a writer. They all want you to come out and be social. But I just served you soup. Come on, you know. Well, first you have to find your chosen family that isn't knocking on the door and forcing you to. They know what it is to be alone, and they know and love being alone too. So you need to find your chosen family. And for me, it's been Macondo, the writing organization that I created. When I lived in Chicago, I used to invite a friend to go to a coffee shop where we could nurse a coffee for 2 hours and exchange each other's manuscripts. So that was like one kind of writing circle. And then later on in my living room in Bucktown, I would invite other writers to come together. And slowly, I started creating a chosen family of writers. So you need to have that because they're going to support and recharge you and understand and know what it is to have a hard day at writing, and they celebrate you when you do have an honor, you know. So do that. And you also need to recharge with other things besides other writers, and you know, find the wisest, oldest tree and sit underneath it, and you can cry there because the oldest tree knows things that people don't know. You know, it's older than people. In Taipei, I went to a tea shop where the most expensive tea is the old tree. So I since thought, wow, I never thought about that the oldest tree has the most expensive tea leaves. So now I know, like, if I feel bad, I just find the oldest tree and sit next to it, and I feel so much better. You can also put some pieces of grass or rock or flowers next to your bed and just be in touch with nature. It's hard to do sometimes when we live very connected. You get off the phone and the computer and give yourself a limpia. Get a day when you really give yourself a limpia. The sky is free and the clouds are always trying to get our attention. So focus on that, and you have the ocean, which is the best therapy I know. Right here, this lake disguised as an ocean. I was told by my driver today that some students in the west side call it the ocean. And it is like the ocean. And it's so wonderful if you live close to it. But I think animals, and if you have an animal, spend time with that animal. If you don't have one, borrow one. You know, it's so wonderful to sleep with an animal. You know, I think that's so great. You know, I sleep with two. And I always wind up at the edge of the bed, but I get up when I go to the bathroom and go around, and then they roll this way. How sweet. And they're very non-judgmental. They're like better than human beings. We shouldn't call people dogs. We should call dogs, when they misbehave, humans. Right? Because they're so sweet and unconditional love if they haven't been abused. And I just feel like, you know, animals and clouds and the sky is free. You just need to look up and stop looking down, and you know, pay attention to those things, small things of nature, and give gratitude, and read people like Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh to make us understand, to look at the world like poets, and to get recharged. You are a poet? Are you a poet? Okay, write poetry. Read poetry that makes you run for your pen. Read poetry that makes you write poetry. That'll make you feel so good. Okay? I promise.
And I'll say this for you and anyone else, email me, because I'm in Chicago now and I would love to create some writing workshops. You can find me on the Northwestern website, but yeah. Daisy Hernández.
Hola, my name is Argelia Martinez. I love that question because I wanted to know about how you prepare to write. I think you shared a lot of good advice. My question is, so someone that's first generation Latina, born and raised in Chicago, had the privilege to go to Mexico because my parents are very connected to the land, and mi abuelito, who's still alive. And for someone that's 40, like hearing you say Maguey made my heart sing, because that is exactly what I'm trying to do, is reclaim what I'm learning with those experiences. So what would be your advice for someone who has this experience as 40, that is someone, like I'm trying to reclaim words and stories as a first gen, who was taught to come up in like corporate and like marketing and whatnot, but my soul is shifting. Like it's shifting to tell stories and to share my own experience of releasing what was told of what succession means. And I'm allowing this time to be able to like help with that journey. So I feel like I have so much to give, but knowing where you are now in life and living in Mexico, I think as someone that is hearing you speak and just wanted your advice as someone who's 40 and identifies in your experience.
Okay, thank you for that question. And 40 is very empowering. I think every decade for us as human beings is empowering because we can see ourselves from I like how in Spanish you say from esta altura, from this height when you get to be older, because you can see your life and understand yourself better. But one of the things I would recommend very much is to travel. You know, if you can't travel to the country of your ancestors, then travel there in a book. Do your investigation, and you're going to have to look in the rubble and footnotes, because a lot of times our history is found in the footnotes, and search for. So I believe we have to travel to other lands, and it's going to help you so much to find yourself and your voice and your language and the words and inspire you. And the best thing I did was buy myself a one-way ticket when I was 28 with my first NEA grant. I was able to finish House on Mongo Street 40 years ago thanks to that grant, and travel to Greece and all over Europe. But I really wanted to travel to Argentina and go all the way to Patagonia. And I haven't done that yet, but I have traveled. And the more I travel, the more I know about myself. You know, even if you go to some place that's not like your culture, like China, you know, they all look like us. You know, the Chinese people revere jade, and they they know that ghosts exist, just like Mexicans. We don't have faith, we know. And, you know, and they revere ancestors. So there's a lot of parallels in our culture. So everywhere I went, I would say, oh, just like us. And it made me love that culture more. So I think the more we travel, the more we see ourselves, the more we love other cultures. And I think that, you know, Mark Twain was right. The antidote to bigotry is travel.
I just turned 80,
Brava, brava.
and I'm ready to keep on going. But I want to thank you especially for your acknowledgement of the role that libraries played in your life. I came from Puerto Rico when I was 8, living in a tenement in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and the library was heaven. And the librarians were fairies, fairy godmothers. And so the whole idea of traveling, if you can travel to Greece or China, there you have it in the library. So I'd like for you to say a little bit more about that, because I think books open up so much. I just published my first book. I'm going to give it to you when you sign yours for me. I'm going to give you a copy, and it was just translated into Spanish from English, and I have my translator right here, Julia Oliver, who's a new professor here at Northwestern. So I'm very excited about her progress, and of course, at 80, I'm very pleased to be starting a new life.
Wow,
Thank you.
brava, brava. And thank you for giving a shout out to the translators, because that is such hard work. And usually they don't even get their name on the cover. So thank you.
My name is Begzada, and currently we are reading your book in Torman College, City College. And the house on Manga Street, the stories resonate with me. I am not Mexican, I am not American, I am from Central Asia, and then I was thinking, how she know about me? And my question is, what advice would you give for the young woman in my generation who has a lot of shame, guilt, insecurities, and have children, and they don't know yet where they're going in this materialistic society? Like, what advice would you give for us? Thank you.
I think you need to write. And, I'm going to say to write. An artist would say paint. A dancer would say dance. But I'm a writer, so I know my path. And I think if you write, you don't have to write poetry, but poetry to me is the hardest of all the genres. It's like ballet. If you want to do jazz dancing, you have to learn ballet first. If you want to do any beautiful writing, you have to begin with poetry. And you need to read poetry, and you need to read poetry that makes you feel like writing. I can't tell you these are my favorite because they might not work for you. Every book is medicine, and you have to find the right prescription. So the library is a pharmacy. That's why we can't ban them. We need to have that pharmacy full, right? We need to find the right one that's here for you. Okay?
Thank you so much. I think we're out of time.
Well,
Yes.
I want to say, if you didn't get to ask your question, don't grieve. I answer all my mail on my website. You can write to me. There's a place you can connect. I answer all my mail. It takes me a little while, but I do get to it. And I also have an Instagram, and there are very cute pictures of my dogs on there. I usually put the book I'm reading with a dog, because I get more likes that way.
Sandra, muchas gracias.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
That was Sandra Cisneros with Daisy Hernández at the Chicago Humanities Fall Festival in 2023. To learn more about these wonderful authors, head to chicagohumanities.org or check the show notes for more information. If you want to catch your favorite speaker the next time they're in town, you can sign up for our email list to be the first to know who's where and what's going on. We've got special perks for members too. Our spring 2024 events go on early presale just to members March 12th, so you can secure tickets before events sell out. It's been known to happen before our general public on sale day, which is March 14th. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced and hosted by me, Alisa Rosenthal, with assistance from the hardworking team at Chicago Humanities, who are producing these live events and making them sound fantastic. Next up for the tapes, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, for a well-researched, heartbreaking, and ultimately optimistic conversation that you're not going to want to miss. We'll be back in your podcast feeds with this episode in 2 weeks. But in the meantime, stay human.